So let's dive in deeper now on the regulatory framework and the legal framework for e-paratransit. Some of the key bits that are linking to the regulatory framework are standards for infrastructures. So that would include infrastructure standards, for example, for charging stations, including the plug types, the voltage levels, the communication protocols between the vehicle and the charger, to ensure compatibility and interoperability of the charging equipment. So that's, of course, a key trigger to enable e-mobility uptake in all sectors, of course, including e-paratransit providers. And similarly, the charging protocol standards are quite critical to ensure the interoperability of the charging equipment across different types of e-vehicles. And here it's quite critical, of course, because the usual vehicle that would be used in informal transportation and e-paratransit would be a micro vehicle, an electric three-wheeler, or two-wheeler. And of course, here charging solutions are quite different to the ones that we're having for cars and trucks and buses. So a focus to service all of these types of vehicles in an interoperable, safe and reliable manner is a key factor in that sense. Similarly, of course, the core bit of each electric vehicle is the battery. So here, standardization of batteries and battery management systems is quite important for the reliability of the vehicle, but also in particular of the safety. And those standards can cover various aspects. So key focus, of course, is on the safety, on the durability, but also on the charging cycles and the energy density. So that, of course, directly relates to the reliability of the vehicle and the services that can be used with. Another important point is relating to data and data standardization, so that data exchange protocols between the vehicle, its components are systematized. That includes the charging status, the battery level, and also the vehicle localization. Accessibility, of course, is a key factor that directly affects all transport providers, and of course here the interconnectivity to passenger transport systems is quite important. So here accessibility standards for e-paratransit providers who would then service first or last mile connectivity offers towards higher capacity public transport solutions are quite important to make sure that the integration of paratransit providers is enhancing accessibility and mobility and not hampering it. Of course, there are a number of international standards that national governments can take up. They are well proven and they are workable in their field to ensure interoperability and connectivity and reduce safety risks. Some of the committees that are relevant in that field you see here, and we'll also provide more links on that in the. So here we have listed a couple of relevant standards. It's only just a selection just to showcase some of the relevant standards related to the plugs, the sockets, the inductive charging solutions, for example, or AC charging installations. I wouldn't go into detail here, but it would be worthwhile to look into those standards then when it comes to the implementation at the national level and the take-up of relevant standards. So overall, the impacts of the regulation are of course also relating to the energy sector. And the increased demand for electricity needs to be taken into account, the need for utilities to upgrade infrastructure. The key focus, of course, to make e-mobility worthwhile and sensible from the climate perspective is, of course, the integration between energy and mobility sectors, And of course here a key focus of national governments needs to be on the shift away from fossil fuels and the integration of renewable energies in the system, so that also two sectors can be decarbonized in a close and integrated manner. So that makes it, of course, quite challenging for national governments to address substantial transformations in various sectors. Here, of course, we look specifically into transport and energy and the interplay between those. And of course, that also means that while supporting the take-up of electric vehicles, national governments need at the same time also invest in growing the renewable energy sector and providing incentives and development solutions for those. Of course, on the energy storage side of things, this is where energy and transport sectors can play a very complementary role, where the transport sector can act as an energy storage, and if a smart grid enables that, energy can be stored in vehicles overnight, for example, and so that incentives in both directions for users of electricity and for users of mobility can enable a complementary support to one another across the two sectors. Here, of course, energy demand management is then quite an important element, and of course for that, key smart infrastructures in the grid and in the vehicle and in the charging are quite essential to enable that. And then, of course, throughout the transition, there will be changes in the costs of energy, so making sure that those cost structures and taxation are being used towards tilting towards more sustainable modes of transport and types of energy are quite important. And if we then look further into the challenges for the regulatory enforcement, then sure, we need to also consider that standardization is one thing at the national level, to have it on the books, but then actually to control and to enforce those standards can be quite difficult and also resource intense. Similarly, of course, that directly relates to the resources to the relevant authorities. Here, a practical approach towards the enforcement of regulation can be quite helpful. Similarly, awareness raising can help to raise the self-policing, if we want to say so, so that users of vehicles and vehicle producers are aware, for example, of the benefits of the standardization, for example, on the safety side of things, so that they recognize the benefit also for their product and for the attractiveness and reliability of their product. And sure, there's always some resistance to change, so this is why it is important to highlight the positive sides towards the businesses that are being involved. So, for example, also for the drivers. So, let's say a standardized battery is likely to have a higher number of charging cycles, is likely to be more energy efficient, which then would also translate into higher incomes for that driver. And similarly, as we touched upon, it's also making the product, the vehicle, more attractive. Sure, there are still a number of technological challenges that require more innovation. That's what we work on in the Solutions Plus project as well. We are also trying here now to feed the learnings from our living labs back into regulatory advice. The key bit, of course, here in rapidly changing technological environments is to keep the regulatory environment up to date and also enforceable.